With rising property prices, it's harder and harder to get into the market. But the good news is that commercial property still ends up being the best vehicle out there for to secure high-yielding properties while other people are still looking at residential. Now, most people think that it's got to do with the building, the land, and the location, but actually finding high-yielding, secure properties that continue to deliver time and time again is all about finding and securing and knowing what's the type of tenants you need in that building to provide you the security and the longevity of continuous cash flow. Now, if you are looking for just that type of investment, then I'm going to break it down in this video for you, the 5 case studies and the 5 tenants that is going to deliver time and time again for you. Now, these are properties and deals we have done recently, so I want to share them with you, but also illustrate so you can learn from these examples what you need to look for in this current market when you are buying a property. Now, let's get started. Number 1, animal services. Most in-demand service in Australia. So tenants like that are very, very sticky, like to stay longer, and the longer you hold it, the more high yielding you actually get with this actual property. So you might get in at a lower yield, but over time as you hold it, the tenant continues to be there, and their rents continue to go up each year by 3 or 4%, you end up with a high-yielding property in just a few years. Now, this property that we've done recently is in Woolli Creek in Sydney. It's sub 1 million, just under 120 square meters. It's got an operating theatre. It's got a consultation room. It's underneath a group of apartments, so a lot of pets already in that those apartments coming to visit the vet. It's their second vet, so very well established. They've been there for a few years. They're on the middle of a 5-year lease with 5-year options. Now, that property was just shy of around 6% yield in Sydney Metro, retail very, very close to the airport. So very, very good buy, because when you look at it in the long term, 3 to 5 years from now, it is going to continue to deliver the cash flow, and the yields are still to compound on itself to deliver a high yielding property. Number 2 is allied health. Allied health, as I said before, is one of the fastest growing areas in Australia. And in fact, it accounts for more than 50% of the employment growth in Australia in the last 10 years. Now, what is allied health? That's your chiro, your dentist, anything that supports your physios, a podiatrist, anything that supports basically the service of an aging population, right? So I've got this one property out in Coffs Harbour. It's just sub 2 million, but it's really, really interesting, even though it's starting out in about a 6% or so yield, but it is freestanding. It has its own building, and they do skin cancer checks. Now, we know in Australia, one of the most in-demand areas of allied health is actually skin cancer checks. So many people get diagnosed with melanoma, and it's actually a regular check, and the doctors don't just charge you tuppence, actually charge you a hell of a lot of money to go there, and they're booked out months and months and months ahead, right? So this type of property, you get land, you get a really good tenant, and you get a good yield, and it's within a few hours drive of Sydney, and you can get there if you're going to just inspect it from Sydney, right? So it's a really, really stellar property, and with a really strong tenant. And that's the type of property you should be looking for when you're looking for land. It's a compound over time in terms of the yield and in terms of stability in the future. Now, trades properties, everyone wants to have a warehouse property. So that's our number 3 case study, is about finding that trade type tenant. Now, this property is in regional Queensland, up in Townsville. They do joinery. So joinery is your carpentry type tenant. So they don't want to do a showroom. So the most popular type of warehouses out there is actually your showroom type warehouse. So you've got your showroom at the front, so people can visit and do the retail bit, and they've got their actual warehouse at the back of the property. So this property newly renovated around that $1 million mark, just probably shy of that 7% yield. If you're borrowing 105%, you are still going to break even and make a little bit of cash flow. And when the interest rate drops, you're going to make a hell of a lot more cash flow. So that comes into high-yielding properties. When you're looking at government, which is our 4th case study, the government tenancies and allied health I talked about before in our previous video is actually about finding tenants that are really reliable, like government tenants are there all the time on government grants, on rolling grants of 2 or 3 years, but they're in lower socioeconomic areas. So this area is actually in between the Gold Coast and Brisbane. It's a little area called Logan, and it is a down and out, a bit of a lower socioeconomic area in the Brisbane area. But we know that low socioeconomic areas do grow, gentrify, and they become really good suburbs to invest in, because you buy undervalued now and you can have the time to wait, and they're growing value. So this property is actually 2 properties together that is around that mid 5 mil range, but you're going to get close to 8% yield on that. So it's phenomenal high yield for this property with a very secure tenant, and it's multiple tenants. So there's over the two, there's about 7 to 8 tenants, and they're all government funded tenants, allied health, social services, and they're congregated there because that is what the demographic demands. Our whole street is full of that type of tenant, and it's right next to the station. So location-wise, it's great. It's got that development potential, secure tenants, high yield, and plus it's freestanding on land, multi-tenanted. So what else could you ask for, right? And that's really a trifecta when you're looking at buying that mid 5 mil range. But it's a good illustration of what the kind of property you should be looking for if you're looking for allied health government type tenants. And finally, number 5 is about professional tenants. Professional tenants are always almost in office spaces or retail spaces. Now, professional tenants pride themselves on having really beautifully decked out and the beautifully renovated premises. So this property is one I just recently saw in Brunswick in Melbourne. Now, it's a very unique office space structure. It's actually more like a terrace. So you go in, you've got downstairs where they're an architecture traffic firm where they help do a lot of build, but upstairs is the main tenant. They're called Wealth Architects. Wealth Architects are actually tenants that do financial planning. And if you are part of the aging population, or if you're wondering, one of the biggest booms during COVID was for financial planners and accountants. They're literally booming because everyone wanted to know how to plan out their futures. They finally had time to sort out their taxes, and they started to think more about where they want, because suddenly being at home seemed like a really good idea. Now they see if they can do it forever, right? So literally financial planners had so much work, and they continue so much work with more and more people seeking an early retirement. So Wealth Architects, financial planners are a great professional service as a tenant to invest in. Now, this property is incoming just a bit above 6%, which is still great in an area that is a metro area, gentrified. So there's a lot more to gain in the capital growth space in this property, as well as compounded cash flow in the next few years. Here you go. There's the 5 different tenants you should be investing in to get your high-yielding commercial properties. While other people are looking at residential, you really should be studying commercial, because in the commercial space, there's still a lot of opportunities right now, and you can retire sooner on high-yielding cash flow properties than you would have if you invested in residential. If you want to find out more, subscribe, hit the bell, reach out to me, helen@unicorn.com.au, and click the link below. Book a free strategy session with one of my strategists. See you in the next video.